So, Trump has left the Crazy Train circus in Washington, D.C., but there's a new dream team. And of this new dream team, Marjorie Taylor Greene is kind of, I would say, the front runner, the main squeeze. And she is quite a piece because there isn't a conspiracy theory that she doesn't believe in. Don't fact check me on that, but I think it's true. She has harassed Parkland shooting victims, blamed Jewish lasers on the California forest fires, believes in QAnon, has supported killing leaders of the Democratic Party like Nancy Pelosi, and it's just some crazy stuff and kind of alarming if you're a centrist. So today on the Tonic Accord, Drew and I are just going to try to figure out what's up with her and what can we do about her and what's the future of the GOP right now. Hey Drew, how are you, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. This is certainly an interesting topic because we've been talking multiple times about how this Republican Party is going to are they going to reconcile with what happened with Trump? How are they going to move forward? And we're starting to see where different factions lie.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good way to put it, and I've honestly been proven wrong at about every corner. Like every time I'm like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. But unfortunately, it seems like even after Capitol Hill, even after Trump finally, leaving and Biden getting inaugurated, Trumpism seems to be evolving really fast. Yeah. And, like Taylor Greene, she could just be a loon. To me, she seems kind of like the embodiment of Alex Jones, but now she's actually in Congress, But to me, it's her willingness to support violence that is the most terrifying to me. Like, she can talk about Jewish space lasers, which were probably lightning, by the way, because, that can start a fire as well. But anyways, like, it's more terrifying to me that she is so willing to say, like, we need to sacrifice blood to defend our freedoms. She supported killing Nancy Pelosi. She said things are in place to do so. That stuff scares me, man.
Yeah, she's in an interesting position where it almost doesn't matter what she says. And in fact, I think all this attention is helping her. Again, I think I've mentioned this before, is why we see a difference in personality between House of Representatives and senators. One of the reasons is because if you're just a congresswoman from a smaller district, you're only appealing to one maybe more rural Georgia district that's very right wing, whereas a senator has to maintain a popular vote of the entire state, right? So the personalities of House of Representatives are a lot more inflammatory, a lot more like that's how you get people like AOC. That's how you get people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, where they have a district that leans really far one way, and they're been given the agency to have these beliefs, even though it might not be popular on a larger scale. Whereas the Senate, like I said, you have to appeal to the whole state, and you're usually a little slower to adopt hype and fads. So that's one reason we see like the QAnon group is starting out in the House, and that makes sense based on our structure.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's quite like glaring at this point, the difference I think between the Senate and the House. And I mean, I think we really first saw that with the storming of the Capitol back on January 6th, right? Like, you had a lot of senators not completely blame Trump for all of it, but they were more willing to say that he definitely played a part in this. But then on the House side, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a festering extremism, and yeah, kind of going off what you say, because I totally agree with it. I think that it's almost like that's kind of how Republican populism has grown. It's because you say the craziest stuff and you keep saying it, so then it makes the next crazy thing not crazy. Right. It's just this loop, and that's kind of what got Trump elected. That's kind of what got the Tea Party going. That's kind of what got Sarah Palin going. She's just the next iteration of it, I think. But the problem is that she's now saying stuff out in the open that even like Trump didn't really say. Because let's be honest, Trump said lock her up for Hillary, but he never said let's hang Hillary or kill her, right? Like this is much worse. And this kind of goes back to that conversation we had about the paradox of tolerance, where like how much do you tolerate crazy hate speech, because eventually it just kind of goes into the mainstream. And I'm reading right now The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich, long book about just the rise and fall of Hitler.
Sure.
And I have to say, I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but this type of demonization and this rhetoric that she specifically is using, these conspiracies that always are centered on a certain group, it's alarming and it needs to be quashed. And I know it's not going to unify the country, because apparently Republicans are all about unifying the country all of a sudden. But I think it's time to get her out of there. They should at least censure her, or at the best remove her, because this is a cancer, as Mitch McConnell called it,
right?
And it needs to go.
Yeah, again, another example of how the Senate is more willing to crack down on this is, Mitch McConnell said this is a cancer on the Republican Party, which is exactly what I said, and both of us have been saying, is that this QAnon lump is a cancerous tumor on the Republican Party. Again, if I was a Republican strategist, I'd be terrified of people like her, because again, yeah, she might win her seat in Georgia, but she's making a fool out of herself for the whole Republican Party, and it puts someone like Kevin McCarthy in a situation where now he has to decide: do you fully denounce the QAnon part of your party, which is growing, or do you let it fester, and then you risk more Marjorie Taylor Greenes making your overall platform more ridiculous? So, Kevin McCarthy's in a weird position, and I know that you had your catching up about his meeting with Trump. I imagine he didn't even want to take that meeting, but he had to. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place. Whereas Mitch McConnell's done with Trump. You threaten his life, he says screw you, this is done. I don't even want to talk to you. So the Senate is way more willing to get rid of this, but the House is. Yeah, it's a problem. And I think the thing, like you said, about about unity, is this is what I was saying about, when we talk about unity, we talk about healing, it means actually getting rid of the problem. So unity is not saying, hey, we're all hunky-dory now. Hey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I know you threatened to kill me or wanted to have your supporters behead me, but now we're buddy-buddy. That's not healing. That's not unity. She still wants Nancy Pelosi's head. She just won't say it because she'll get in trouble. But I guarantee you, she hasn't changed her mind about anything. She still starts house stuff. She makes fun of Parkland shooting victims. I mean, it's ridiculous. So even censure, right? Like censure, which is just basically the entire Congress saying, you're an idiot and you don't deserve to be here, but you still have to be because you're elected, right? I still think that would just be a badge of honor for her. I think she would go back to her constituents, and I'm not the first person to have this analysis. I do think it would be a badge of honor. She'd go back to her constituents and look, the evil Democrat pedophile ring said I'm a bad girl. Isn't that dope? I'm one of you. They can't even take me in Washington. They want to censure me. I'm getting silenced again or whatever. I think it has to come from within, right? It has to be Kevin McCarthy saying we have to stamp this out. But will he do it? I don't know. I think, though, that, if I was a Democrat, this is a good thing for the long-term strategy, because she's eating the Republican Party from the inside. She's making an absolute fool of herself with this Jewish laser stuff. I mean, it's a joke. It's a meme. How could any, educated, centrist, higher socioeconomic Republican that maybe voted for Biden in Georgia but voted for Trump in 2016, how would they go back to supporting this Republican Party?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she literally just blamed the Rothschilds, who are always the anti-Semitic trope, right? Right. It's so obvious what she's doing. I mean, there's a really disturbing video of when, I think it was Ilhan Omar, who I am, believe me, no supporter of, but she went up. She basically tried to organize a protest to say that you aren't actually recognized as a congresswoman because you swore your oath on the Quran and not the Bible. Yeah. So she's a person. She's a religious Christian fundamentalist who also has kind of mixed QAnon into that. And I think you're absolutely correct when you said that unifying and healing means that you first need to, operate on the disease. And sticking with that cancer metaphor, if you have a brain tumor, you don't just deny it and ignore it. You need to get it removed to move on, right? Right. That seems like common sense to me. And let's see, what's his name? Charlie Sykes. He runs the Bulwark podcast. Great conservative media, kind of the Never Trump movement. I've kind of found at least someone to listen to that's still a Republican that's not nuts. But he basically said that, even though people think Mitch McConnell's the leader of the Republican Party right now, it's actually Kevin McCarthy. He has a better temperature of the room. He actually understands, unfortunately, what a lot of their constituents want. Right? Senate is 6-year terms, more pragmatic. And like you said, the House is much more volatile. Yeah. And so but the thing is, which I do want to get to, is the Republicans do know how to get rid of a malignancy, right?
Yeah.
What was his name? The Iowa guy, Steve King, was
Steve
it?
King, right? The racist
You know,
guy.
yeah, they basically censured him. That's basically what they did, right? They condemned him publicly and removed him from committees, and he kind of just fell away. And so that's why I don't know if I totally agree with you that it would infuel her, because you're right, it would make her a martyr to her base. But I wonder if at the nation as a whole, if they saw that, maybe some of the people who just follow in line would be like, okay, well, she's crazy.
Well, I think she should lose her committee seats. I just think the censure part, like the censure part is just a little slap on the wrist that's like, you're bad. And I think she'd just take that as a badge. I do think, though, that you're right about the committee thing. Like, that's actually the real stuff. We're like, get her off. I mean, she's a freshman. She's a freshman congresswoman, and she was on the budget committee. I mean, that's like the big dog stuff. Like, that's like, if you're on the congressional budget committee, that's like you help decide the actual where the money goes. That usually is not a freshman thing. Like, usually you work up and you wait years to get onto those big budget committees. So I'm not even sure I understand why Kevin McCarthy put her on the budget committee in the first place, but he should take her off. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, she's like even touted 9/11 truth stuff. Like, you're like, oh my God, dude, this is like a YouTube channel in a congresswoman. But no, I do agree that like the committees, she should be taken off the committees. That's like actual real power being taken away from her.
Right. And no, I mean, actually, yeah, like the more I think about it, I feel like censuring's only really good for the historical context of it, because not Kevin McCarthy. I'm totally spacing the historic Joseph McCarthy. He was censured in 1954, and I would probably argue that his legacy has quite been tainted, and that probably did help with that, right?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
So like in a historical context, yeah, they could say, well, Marjorie Taylor Greene was censured, blah, blah, blah. But you're right. I think in the here and now, it doesn't really matter. And plus, I was reading, so Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2 of the Constitution just says that each house can determine the rules of how to punish or remove someone. But it takes a 2/3 vote. And let's be honest, in the House, they're not going to get 66% of Republicans to want to kick her out. They're just not.
No, and that brings me back to something you mentioned in your catching up, which was, I think it was 54 or 56 of Republicans still want Trump to run again in 2020.
54, yeah.
54%. So a majority of Republicans want Trump to run again in 2024. That means a majority of Republicans think that he's the best chance they got to take back power as a Republican Party and are on board. And so it's no surprise. It's no surprise that Kevin McCarthy is debating, do I just accept this QAnon thing into the fold? Because a good amount of Republicans are fine with it. That's what's so crazy is like, again, there's like Mitch McConnell is trying to lead from the top down. Mitch McConnell is like, this is a cancer and we're reprehensible. And, and he's saying like, Joe Biden won the election, right? The things that I think he should be saying, but he's trying to lead the Republican Party from the top down, whereas Kevin McCarthy, like you just mentioned, is trying to read the room. He's trying to gauge the temperature. And right now the temperature says a majority of Republicans are still on board with this stuff. And back to another conversation we had about the Overton window, Marjorie Taylor Greene is pushing that window. So it's like, hey, well, look, I'm not like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't believe Jewish space lasers started the California wildfires, but I still believe that the election was stolen, which is based in no facts. I still believe that, maybe there's a pedophile ring with the Clintons, but I don't know. Like, she normalizes things that are ridiculous, and she pushes that Overton window. And again, when we talked about the Overton window, it's the idea that you go way out here so that it rubber bands back to here where you really want. And what the Republican Party, or at least her wing of the Republican Party really wants is people to believe that the election was stolen, people to believe that Joe Biden's illegitimate and that Trump still has the power to come back. And they're riding that wave. I can't believe it's happening. And frankly, I think it's going to be really bad for the Republicans.
Yeah, and on that point, I know earlier you said, yeah, this actually really could be a good strategy for the Democrats, and I agree with you, but I am not happy about that. I am not happy about that at all. Like, as someone, former conservative, still would probably vote for some conservatives, that's alarming to me, that basically what you're going to see is a fragmented, chaotic Republican Party that can't win any elections on a Senate level especially. And, Warnock's seat, back to Georgia, Raphael Warnock, who just beat Kelly Loeffler, he's going to be a highly contested seat going forward.
Yeah.
And if the Republicans don't change, I don't see them winning any national elections, or not national elections, but bigger elections like that. Because right now I'm seeing, and this is what you touched on, talking about the difference between the House and the Senate. The Republicans have become kind of a rural local party that can't win national elections. And to me, that's not good. I still, like, there are some Republicans that I still full-heartedly believe, but when you're Matt Gaetz, frat boy Gaetz, going to Wyoming, trying to get Liz Cheney removed, and she's ultra conservative. Like, what is this? And so I'm worried that I don't want a single party Democrat ruled country, because there's a lot of executive orders that have already been signed that I don't agree with, and I don't want one party rule. I don't think anyone wants one-sided rule. And so the Republicans need to, honestly, excuse my language, get their effing shit together. Yeah. And Adam Kinzinger, who I quite like, and he's much more right than I am. Like, I don't agree with a lot of his policies, but he's actually trying to start a new political action committee that's aimed at supporting Republicans who push back on extremism and misinformation. So I hope to see more of that. There are these guys, but there's just not enough of them, man.
Yeah, and again, as someone who's more liberal, it's not like I take. Like, it's not like I'm happy of the chaos I've seen. Like, again, political strategy wise, it's like, oh man, like the Democrats are in a good place to keep power for like 8 years. But, a lot could change. And two is, let's remember that like people have died because of this movement, because of the QAnon movement. People have died and died for stupid causes. So, it's not, it's like the Jewish space laser thing is funny, but what's not funny is the people that died at the Capitol Hill siege, or the threats against Nancy Pelosi's head that are real threats. And the guy, they're still looking for the guy who planted pipe bombs at the different DNC and RNC headquarters. So, like, when we say Republicans are playing with fire, I mean literally, like, or almost literally, they're like playing with real violence and fire. And they're going to get burned. And again, I want to make very clear that, like, this is also part of my idea of, like, this is the bed that Republicans have made, and now you're sleeping in it. This is what happens when you allow misinformation to fester. If Republicans should have called out that the election was fair and just a week or two after November. Right? It should have been, hey, let's give Trump maybe a week or two to get through the courts. But as soon as we started to see all these court cases started dying, guys, it's over. But they didn't. They let it spread. And then a few months later, you had a full-on siege. And so it's like, I understand why Mitch McConnell is saying this is a cancer now, but he should have said it earlier. And it's like, dude, you're sleeping in the bed you made.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And, like, so I think we talked about him a little bit off the air, but Madison, Cawthorn or whatever?
Oh, yes. Uh-huh. Yeah.
He looks like Tom Brady mixed with Hitler Youth. I think I told you that, but he said, there's a quote when he was running his campaign. He said, "I have built my staff around communications rather than legislation." And I would argue that's probably all of these freshman Trumpist type of congressmen and women, right? Like, there's no substance to policy. They don't care about the betterment of the nation. It's all about, like, this conspiratorial messaging. And I agree with you. There was a time and place to put all this out, and it's really too late. And I know, we live in a democracy, and obviously people need to be heard. But it was actually Dan Carlin in his Common Sense podcast who said, if you believe in, like, every conspiracy and there's no reason and no willingness to negotiate with the other side, should you be allowed to vote? Like, should there be a litmus test or at least some baseline, especially for if you're going to run for Congress and you're going to have to work with these other people, or at least in theory work with these other people, but you actually believe they are satanic cannibals too? Should you be allowed to run? Like, shouldn't there be some litmus test, like at least a baseline of who can be in Congress?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing. I mean, again, it's an interesting question. It's a tough one to answer, but it's definitely an interesting question because it is like we haven't seen something like this yet, or at least on this level. So it's like, do we ask things like, man, like if this woman legitimately wants her political, like, opponents, but also like colleagues at work to die, like, should she be allowed to be there? And that's a very legitimate question because people. I think it was. Not Ilhan Omar. There was a congresswoman who I forget her, I'm blanking on the name, but she moved her office away from Marjorie Taylor Greene's office because she felt threatened by her staff for raiding her without masks on. And you're like, oh my God, like she's a child. What a childish thing to do. Like, you're right that like there has to be limits, and it's amazing that like, but she's taking the Trump playbook and turning it up to 11. You know, she's getting a ton of free press. She has us talking about her. I imagine her supporters where she's from will double down with her on all this crap. But again, it's just like she's on QAnon. She's on like QAnon Reloaded, and I worry that the Overton window is just like will pull back to just QAnon light, and that's just. I don't know, man. It's just crazy that we're even at this position where someone can believe these things and be elected to our government and represent the United States in a capacity she is.
Yeah, very, very well said. You know, and I always just go back to that. It was the Republican Party that was founded, you know, at the onset of the Civil War. It was the party of the Union. It was the party of freedom, of trying to bring the nation back from the brink. And it's kind of wild now that they're the ones who are putting out cringe conspiracies and the ones that are actually joking about hot civil war. You know, how the tables have turned. And I love how, like, speaking to the Overton window, what it means to be conservative just keeps expanding. Mm-hmm. Like, if you look at any of the values of a true fiscal or even religious conservative, they've all been thrown out, man. And Trump was just the icing on the cake for that. But, like, if you're a true conservative, and I'm just like, maybe if even one person hears this, like, that could change. Like, think about what it is to be a conservative, and think about what Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump are. And are those compatible? Because I don't think so.
Yeah. I think the only consistent I've seen is the abortion issue. Everything else is free trade. Who knows anymore? You know what I mean? Limited government. Who knows anymore, man? Like, that's all up. Like, that's all up in the air with Republicans. The only thing that's consistent is the abortion issue, which isn't going anywhere. But everything else has been thrown out. Like, the playbook is completely different.
Yeah.
We'll see how it plays out, man. We'll see how it plays out. I don't think it's a winning strategy. I think Mitch McConnell realizes it's not a winning strategy, and that's why he's against it. But Kevin McCarthy has to make some big decisions very soon. Yep. And I'll just wrap up by saying that I hope that he went down to Florida to make some weird deal with Trump where he's like, hey, you can stay involved in the party and we will not, go against you in the impeachment trial. But can you never run again? Like, I wonder if there was some, like, agreement, like, yo, we're going to leave you alone and let you still, say crazy stuff, but don't run again, man. Don't run, please.
I hope. But anyways, thanks everyone for listening. We are on Spotify now, so check us out there. I know we had some people asking, so we are there. And again, we're still on the other ones. And we're in 2021. We're in February. To me, it still feels like March of 2020, but, time flies. So take care.
Take care, everyone.